A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he hopes to visit U.S. President Donald Trump at the earliest suitable date this month. As talks continue over Trump's 28-point peace plan for Ukraine, Moscow says it is avoiding megaphone diplomacy. Plus, West Sumatra in Indonesia faces severe flooding, which has submerged hundreds of homes and farmlands. Let's begin the world today. Talks between Ukraine and U.S. officials continue over President Trump's 28-point agenda for peace in the region. Now, those officials are also now working on arranging another meeting between President Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, to visit the U.S. at the earliest suitable date this month. The U.S. says Ukraine has agreed to the peace deal, but says there are still some minor details to be sorted out. Kyiv has not reacted to this, and the White House has not confirmed whether or not if there will be a meeting between the two leaders. In the meantime, Russia and Ukraine reported air attacks overnight. At least 6 people were killed in Russian strikes in the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. Russia, on the other hand, claims to have intercepted 249 Ukrainian drones overnight, including over the Black Sea and Kursk. In Russia's Rostov region, the death toll from a Ukrainian strike rose to 3 after initial reports of 1 death. Despite criticism over the U.S. president's peace plan, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt says the president does not favor either side in the Ukraine peace efforts. Over the weekend, European countries suggested they had a rival plan, although U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said he had not seen a counter-proposal, with the EU and other Western nations seemingly sidelined. Europe apparently accepted that Russia would be welcomed back to the G8 under any such plan.
Absolutely, he does, to your second question. As for your first question, with respect to the deadline, the president wants to see this deal come together as quickly as possible, and he trusts that his team is doing everything they can to get it over the finish line. I would point any critics to the words of the Ukrainians yesterday, in which they said that they feel very positive about this plan. They've been very involved. They have had direct input on the language of this plan, and that we are in direct communication and correspondence with them. Any idea, let me just finish with this, the idea that the United States of America is not engaging with both sides equally in this war to bring it to an end is a complete and total fallacy. And I saw a lot of misinformation and rumors and allegations against people in this building, such as Secretary Rubio and Special Envoy Wynkoff and the president himself, that they are favoring one side over the other. That could not be further from the truth. I have watched as the president and his team have worked around the clock overnight with both sides on endless phone calls, endless meetings to try to bring this war to a close. And any suggestion otherwise is a complete misunderstanding of the facts. It's coming from people who have no idea what they're talking about, or people who are pushing their own agenda, or maybe people who don't want to see this war come to an end. I don't know. Maybe they're profiting off of it. Maybe they benefit from it in some way, but nobody in this building benefits from war. We want to see this war come to an end, and that's what the president and his team are proudly working to do. And I think the critics should just take a step back and think about what happened with Israel and Gaza. There were a lot of doubters, and we got the hostages out, and this president secured a peace deal that still exists and is ongoing today. So everyone should just respect the work this administration is doing and watch the process unfold.
Amidst all of this, the Russian Kremlin says it is waiting on the U.S. president to present it with the updated draft of the peace plan. Government spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told journalists today, "We understand that the text that we unofficially obtained earlier has also undergone changes, but at some point the time will come when we will have our own contacts with the Americans and we will officially receive some information. There have been no new developments in this regard so far." U.S. media reports say U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll is holding talks with both Russian and Ukrainian teams in the UAE. Meanwhile, Peskov says there's so much conflicting information and conflicting statements being published about the peace talks, and that Russia prefers to avoid what he calls megaphone diplomacy and will wait on the United States to share information about their contacts in a formal way. Meanwhile, European leaders Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen have put a positive spin on the talks between US and Ukrainian officials in Geneva amid suggestions the bloc had been shut out of the discussions. Speaking during the EU-Africa Union summit in Luanda, Angola on Monday, they both said they appreciated the new momentum in peace negotiations. Talks in Geneva on the US-backed 28-point peace plan took place between Washington and Kyiv in the past days, with a proposal initially including Ukraine ceding key territory, holding elections, limiting its military, and ruling out NATO membership.
There is a new momentum in peace negotiations. Yesterday's meeting in Geneva between the United States, Ukraine, the European Union institutions, and European representatives marked significant progress. The United States and Ukraine informed us that the discussions were constructive and that progress was achieved on several issues. We welcome this step forward, and some issues remain to be resolved, but the direction is positive. And we commend the efforts of Presidents Zelensky and Trump and their teams.
An efficient and coordinated European engagement, as well as a strong European presence in Geneva, has allowed us to make good progress in the negotiations for just and lasting peace in Ukraine. While work remains to be done, there is now a solid basis for moving forward. As we do, we must remain united and keep placing Ukraine's best interest at the center of our efforts. This is about the security of our entire continent, now and in future. And today's meeting in Luanda reaffirmed that we are united in our support of Ukraine. These are our core European principles moving forward. Ukraine's territory and sovereignty must be respected. Only Ukraine, as a sovereign country, can make decisions regarding its armed forces. The choice of their destiny is in their own hands.
Let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird. Now, Maria, what is the status of the proposed talks between the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump?
Yes, where we stand right now is that the U.S. has been very clear that it seems as if there is a potential deal that could be in place and that the minor adjustments that the U.S. is claiming are minor, that President Zelensky is asking for are not insurmountable, as the press secretary and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, did state earlier today. And so these adjustments that he's asking for and amendments, obviously Russia has already responded and said they cannot guarantee that a deal will be in place with these amendments. But it is expected that Zelensky could be in the United States before the end of the month, in the next few days and weeks. And so that obviously will be to address the final details of this. And so the president believes that he is helping to assist and that Ukraine has pretty much come to the table and has agreed upon all of which President Trump and President Putin discussed in Alaska.
House spokespersons say the U.S. president is not taking sides in the talks they held in Geneva over the weekend, but the optics really seem like Ukraine is giving up so much just to have peace with Russia. What is Russia expected to give up?
Well, at this time, Russia, it's very minimal, it appears as if. And I think that is really where Russia has already responded to state that depending on what the amendments are that they'll be asking for to these peace agreements, that could heavily impact, because as you stated, it's still heavily controlled regions by Russia. And so if there are any regions that are not currently within the sphere of what Russia believes that they should have control over. And obviously, this is very similar to what they've been saying for most of this war. And so at this time, I think the question is going to be, is President Zelensky going to ask for territories that Russia has already requested that stay within Russian occupation?
And speaking of which, Maria, according to the Kremlin spokesperson, they will wait for the formal information from the United States on the outcomes of the meetings. So is there confidence this time the U.S. will be more objective when it comes to steering Russia in the direction of peace with Ukraine?
Well, the president has said he's staying objective. The United States is objective in this matter. As you mentioned, and rightfully so, when you look at some of the extent of the occupation area that Russia is asking for, and that they are saying should stay within control of Russia. It does appear as if potentially this could be heavily leaning in that direction. And so the president obviously worked very closely with President Putin on this. And so did the U.S. Promote the end to this, or has there been any potential leaning in the side of Russia being able to get the majority of what they have asked for? But at this time, I think that I think the U.S. is hopeful that any part that the U.S. does play in this, that the U.S. plays a role in being able to end the peace. Because as we know, just last evening, there were more killing and woundings of civilians and deadly attacks overnight. So that is, I think, the key components here that the president is identifying and that Americans are hoping that can be assisted in.
Yeah, and also heard that President Trump accused the Ukrainian president again of having zero gratitude for his work and efforts towards peace in Ukraine. Is that going to be a problem going forward?
Well, I think going forward, and as you mentioned, I mean, there has been support, obviously, for President Zelensky prior to President Trump's administration by former President Biden. President Trump brought President Zelensky into the White House very early on in his administration, and has been very clear that his hope is to end the war. And so I think moving forward, the hope, obviously, the president has been very clear that he hopes to have further business relationships. So obviously, this is a much larger global economic piece as well, that the president is hoping this war can end so that other matters around the global economy can also begin to move forward.
Maria, thanks again for bringing us the update.
Yeah.
We're off on a short break on the world today, still ahead. Friends and colleagues pay tribute to the late Professor Joy Obu. Stay with us. Welcome back. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has traveled to Angola just days after the G20 summit, where he's attending the two-day 7th African Union-European Union Summit. The gathering, the first in 3 years, brings together leaders from both continents to strengthen cooperation. In his address, President Ramaphosa emphasized that rules-based multilateral trading systems remain essential for Africa's economic progress.
Inequality in global trade affects the world's most vulnerable, including countries that are already burdened by mounting sovereign debt, a sharp decline in exports, and cuts in overseas development assistance. These are issues that are addressed in the G20 Leaders' Declaration adopted in Johannesburg over this past weekend. In the declaration, the leaders reaffirmed their commitment to support efforts by low and medium income countries to address debt vulnerabilities. When global trade systems are stable and predictable, it gives confidence to governments, assurance to exporters, and offers security to workers around the world. Such reform should be development-centered and address persisting development gaps in the global economy. Crucially, It must allow developing economies to adopt legitimate public policy measures that support value addition, industrialization, and diversification. We need to ensure that trade becomes a powerful instrument for inclusive, sustainable, and balanced growth.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Here in Nigeria, the Senate has formally launched a new counterterrorism strategic plan 2025 to 2030 in the capital city, Abuja. Officials presented it as a shift away from European security agreements towards a domestically led policy and growing pressure from the United States. Senate President Godswill Akpabio said the roadmap reflects national priorities and long-term ambitions. The strategy, developed by the National Counterterrorism Center under the Office of the National Security Advisor, sets out a 5-year framework aimed at strengthening national resilience, improving coordination between institutions, and expanding both local and international partnerships. The launch comes after a wave of mass kidnappings targeting Christian communities, including the abduction of more than 300 students from a Catholic school in Niger State.
Relying mostly on international partners to address this problem, which is ours. We have the US, the UK, and the European Union funding programs to address violent extremism in our country, where we have capable institutions and individuals who can assist in addressing this problem. The NCTC has been coordinating with so many NGO, international non-governmental organizations to address this problem. But we felt there is a need to let Nigerians also know what is going on and see how they could come in to help.
The plan offers a framework for transforming our institutions, modernizing our security architecture, strengthening national resilience, and expanding partnerships across governments. We have unveiled a strategic plan for 2025 to 2030 with the hope that this will bring a solution to fear and to insecurity in Nigeria, in our region, in the Sahel, and in all aspects of human endeavors.
The Nigerian Institute of International Affairs has held an evening of music and tributes in honor of the late Professor Joy Obu, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs and former Director General at the Institute. The tribute was also syndicated at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Abuja. Here in Lagos, former ambassadors and staff of the NIIA recalled special moments of how she impacted lives and created a friendly and respectable environment at work.
A mother, a friendly colleague, and a caring boss. These are the words that characterized the evening of tributes for late former Minister of Foreign Affairs and former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Professor Joy Obu. As former ambassadors, colleagues, family and friends recalled memories of encountering with her.
Commissioner to Canada, 2003.
Kickstart of the tributes at the NIIA is Director General Professor Hossa Osaye, who told of how Professor Obu recommended him for high-profile jobs.
Had recommended me for a position. It was the first time at the Nigerian Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies that they thought of having the position of Deputy Director General. But this was to begin with, the position of the Director of Studies. And a gentleman came to my office at the University of Ibadan, and he said to me, I have this letter from the DG. I looked at the letter, I asked him a few questions. I thought this was very great. But after speaking to him for 5 minutes, I said to him, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to take this position. And she said to me, I told them, you're a very difficult person, she said to me. I told them you were not going to take it. So I apologized to her and I said, you should have told me, ma. For you and for you alone, I would have taken that position.
Colleagues such as Ambassador Enahon Imohe, former chairman, Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, who was represented by Marilyn Akpofure of the Institute, and former Nigerian High Commissioner to Canada, Ambassador Lufemi George, referred to her as a humble colleague whose attitude never changed when she was made Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Despite her extraordinary academic and career achievements, she remained humble, warm, and homely. She was a loving wife to a beloved husband, a devoted mother to her adorable children, and an affectionate and trusted advisor to countless mentees within and beyond her work environment.
She really adequately represented the interests of Nigeria, and I'm sure that she will herself be proud that she did her best for Nigeria.
From the Institute, former colleagues said she was a mother who took care of everyone, encouraged them to achieve their dreams, and made the NIA beautiful with her love for flowers.
I was the secretary of the sanitation committee, and if anything happened, she will hold me. She will say, Ngozi, Gabino, where were you? With Auntie Agatha Ude then. So as a secretary to this standing committee, I can testify that her method was that of do as I do. Because as we are cleaning the environment, Joy Obu is uprooting the grasses with her hands.
She said, what's your name again? I said, FM Obi. She now looked at me and said, how old are you? And I told her my age, but I'm not going to say it here. She now said, wow, you look like my last son. I've never seen the son. I don't know how he looks like. And she said, FM, don't go away. You're going to pick your letter today. So I waited. Then when we resumed as staff of the NIA, fortunately, one day, her son came. She sent for me. And I came. And I saw him. We look exactly alike.
The only representative of the late Professor Joy Obu's family, Ndidi Adiohun, spoke lovingly about her.
In Nigeria today, where there are very few servant leaders, she embodied servant leadership, and not many people talked about her spirituality. Her spirituality was amazing. That is what I think fueled her in doing so many groundbreaking things, the idea that God propelled her to do so many things, and she was just an amazing, ethical servant leader.
Punctuated by hymns and anecdotes, the atmosphere at the NIA was one of warmth and bittersweet, as they said a farewell to a woman they also referred to as a stallion. Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
And just before we go, it's yet another win for Channels Television as it goes into partnership with the China Global Television Network, CGTN. Going forward, both stations will be co-producing a program called Talk Africa, where African and global issues will be discussed. Talk Africa airs today, Tuesday, at 8:30 p.m. right here on Channels Television. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.